If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. Night owls, night shifters. What's the creepiest thing you heard or seen at night? I had heard a loud noise come from the bed of my truck while driving 5 hours north. I thought I may have broken something in the rear end, so I pulled over, to find out a drunk guy had crawled in the back of my truck and fallen asleep. He woke up 5 hours and 450 kilometers away from where he fell asleep. This happened to me like 10 years ago, but I still remember it vividly. Me and my cousin were house sitting literally in the middle of nowhere. It was a one-story house built higher on the ground, surrounded by mountains. The clock was nearing 4 a.m. and we were just chatting and snacking in the kitchen when we heard a sound coming from right outside one of the two windows. It was the crunching of leaves, like someone or something heavy was stepping on them slowly. At first, we thought it was a wild animal searching for food, but then things got creepier when we heard another sound coming from the other window that overlooked the metal stairs that led up to the front door of the house. It was as if someone was climbing up them. Footsteps sounded too heavy for an animal. No one was supposed to be around the perimeter, so we froze in place thinking it could be someone dangerous. My cousin wanted to take a look, but I stopped him, thinking whoever that was could have a gun. But he didn't listen to me and looked anyway. There was no one. If someone was there and climbed down quickly, we definitely would have heard it. We were literally 1 to 2 meters away from the window. While we were trying to make sense of the situation, the sounds picked up again. It was the crunching steps coming from the first window again. The window was above the counter, so I climbed to take a look. My cousin did the same too. We could still hear the steps because it was close. And then the scariest part came. The steps got closer and closer, eventually passing right under the window, but there was nothing in sight. Nothing. As if someone invisible walked right by us. Our heads just followed the sound. I froze in fear again, and my cousin must have been scared as well because he pulled me back and closed the window. I turned my head around to ask him what the hell just happened, but when I looked at him, half his face was covered in blood. I think this was a coincidence that his nose started bleeding at that exact moment, but it was enough to scare us into going to a windowless room and staying awake until the sunrise. I was lying in my bed, reading. Suddenly I hear loud footsteps right outside the window. Sounded like someone was wearing heavy boots and basically thumping their feet and past my windows. Here's the thing. I live on the 9th floor, top floor of my building. The terrace can't be accessed in the night, and on the rare occasion that people do walk there at night, it sounds quite different. There's no place to walk outside my window cause it's a 9th-floor drop. And that sound definitely came from beside me. Not above. I worked for a moving company restocking the trucks based on supplies they would need that morning. It's a shitty job. Never work for a moving company. Do not do it. Anyways, I'm stocking a truck pulled up to the dock when I realize my vision is getting fuzzy. I'm tired. I rub my eyes. My forearm feels wet, but I figure it's sweat and my vision clears. It happens again. I rub my eyes and my forearm feels wet again. I look at my arm finally to see hundreds of crushed baby spiders. My vision wasn't fuzzy, baby spiders were crawling on my eyelashes. I was covered in baby spiders. I ran to the nearest water hose and got everything off. The next morning I had lots of tiny bites on my legs, but otherwise nothing else. Used to clean a church alone late at night. There was a piano upstairs, which I thought was broken, which was why it was upstairs in the attic. One night I started hearing piano music from the attic. I immediately assumed someone was up there pranking me, so I went up and there was no one. When I turned around to walk away after realizing no one was there, I heard a loud bang behind this metal door, which I assume was an attic closet. Never worked the night shift again. Asked the one other person that worked night shifts, she confirmed weird shit happening was normal. I was working as campus security and I had to close down the main law school building. The building was downtown in a major city and was old enough that the tunnels underneath it were used in the Underground Railroad. Think dirt floors, and wooden crossbeams, like you would imagine a mine. There was work going on in the tunnels, not sure what it was, but I think they were reinforcing the supports. Anyways, as part of my routine I had to go around and check to make sure the build was vacant. I climbed down the ladder into the tunnels, all the contractor lights are off, I say a few hello, anyone here? And shine my flashlight around silence for a moment. Then I hear what sounds like a radio tune from the 1920s coming from the tunnel. I immediately climb the ladder and padlock the trap door, arm the motion sensors and leave. Duck that. Working nights as an EMT. Get dispatched to a call in a somewhat wooded suburban area. Round about 4:15 MPT ends up refusing to go. Partner stays back to gather signatures and explain the refusal form. I go to load up the stretcher and kill the emergency lights. The road we sat on was wooded on one side and homes on the right. So I rolled the stretcher to the back door, climb in the cab. Turn off the flashers, go round back to open the doors, load the stretcher. I shut the doors and hear a twig snap in the woods, not thinking much of it, 'cause animals, twigs, woods, you know? Hear another quick snap a few seconds later, immediately followed by what sounded like a very feminine giggle. Let out an audible nope. Turned and headed back to the house to get my partner. I was working at a middle school as a night shift custodian. I cleaned a long U-shaped wing full of classrooms every weeknight. I'd already locked up one set of doors to the wing and was about to lock the ones at the other end of the U. I made the full lap around the wing, and I'd been cleaning there all night alone, and came to the end of the hallway where the doors to the rest of the school were. When I shut the lights off, the dark silhouette of what looked like a child ran from across the end of the hallway from left to right. There were doors down there, but I just locked them all up and no one was around. I was so creeped out, I locked the doors connecting the wing to the rest of the school and ran to my car. I always felt like I was seeing things out of the corner of my eye working there at night, but that was the most visible, for sure thing I saw at that place. About 17 years ago, I was working the overnight at a hotel resort as their pastry chef. There had been a change to a wedding's dessert choices. Yes, a case of momsilia. So it is about 2:30 to 3 a.m. I'm switching over the oven for another round of baking. And then step out for a smoke. And I hear a very loud bang. Like a wall being hit with a baseball bat full on. I go back inside, absolutely nothing out of place. Figured something had fallen but could find nothing out of place. So start working on some of the other desserts for the party. Went over to check ovens. Heard it and saw it. We had these big 8 master locks on the walk-ins because we had some issues with overnight thefts and a security guard that had worked on property. The freezer door was locked because I had no reason to use it. But the door pushed out as far as the lock would let it. This happened again about 20 minutes later. So just to brush off the willies, I said if you want it open, hit open. And removed the padlock. Silent the rest of the night. The breakfast chef comes in at 5 a.m., sees me a bit out of sorts and shaken up a bit. I bring it up. Look at me like I am totally nuts. About 11 a.m. the chef comes in, I follow him into his office and ask him as well. He had been working on property since he was 15 aside from when he was in college. And point of fact straight up tells me, no joking, deadly serious, and flat out says. That's probably the old owner's wife. She had passed in the 80s during his second year working there. They had to keep the body in the freezer. Because a blizzard had come through and the road was impassable. She was there for 4 days. On a side note, due to the age of the property and its history, there had been paranormal investigators several times before and after this event. After a night out at the bar, some friends came back to my place to hang out. I got home first and went into the dark house where I had to walk into the living room to switch on a light. While I was struggling to turn the little knob on the lamp in the pitch dark, from the corner of the room came this low, slow, wet mixture between a hack and an evil laugh. Like every evil character I've ever seen doing the evil laugh combined didn't compare to the bone-chilling slow, guttural laugh that came from the absolutely dark corner of the room. Bitch, I broke the screen door off my front door running out of that house and just screaming like a banshee to my friends walking up to the house. I screamed there's someone in the house. Over and over, and didn't understand why we all weren't running at that point, but I have a couple buddies who for some bizarre reason like to run to danger rather than from it. Well, long story in short, if I thought the monster in the corner was laughing hard when I ran out, you can imagine how hard he was laughing when my buddies run in with us behind them and click on the light, in one try, and I live there, and find our friend Steve rolling on the floor holding his belly from the pain he'd somehow got ahead of us all, then shimmied the sliding glass door open, I know dowel in the track, and then hid in the corner. It was just my good luck to be the first person inside to get to experience the sheer terror of a menacing laugh coming from a dark corner 5 feet away. That's the creepiest sound I've heard in the dark. Not really scary or even a story, but I used to work in a clothes store and occasionally had to help overnight to merchandise, etc. There would only be a few of us for a pretty big store, and you'd occasionally be sent into the stock room, a pretty big room with lots of dark aisles, very quiet and far from the shop floor. It was lit with motion-activated lights and had no windows, so every now and again if you were there too long the lights would turn off and you'd be in pitch black until you could find your way to the entrance door, wave your hands around and get the lights back on. One time the lights turned back on and I didn't hear a door open and I wasn't anywhere near the sensor. Nope, didn't like that one bit. Something similar happened to me when I worked retail. The bathroom had 2 stalls and a motion sensor light also by the door. I was in one stall just ducking around on my phone, dreading going back on the floor when the light shut off. 5-minute timer, I'm thinking Valp. Back to work. When I hear the door open and the light turns back on. Then I hear the second stall door open and close. I give it a minute and realize they probably want me to leave so they can do their business. I exit my stall and the second stall was open with no one in the restroom besides me. I noped out of there real quick and washed my hands in the break room next door. I don't even believe in ghosts, but that was freaky. Not me, but this was told to me at my last job by our night shift lead man. So the longtime foreman of one of the manufacturing departments, Ignacio, was always the last guy out of the building after shift ended, generally meeting with Joe, the day shift guy, in the production office and giving him a brief rundown on status of pertinent info relating to work or whatever before heading home. Sadly, Ignacio passed away a couple of summers ago and Joe took over training his replacement and so was working nights with new guy Rick. Once Rick was satisfactorily trained, Joe went back to days and regular routine. Joe swore up and down that in the early hours of the morning, whilst Rick and he were talking in the production office, the door swung open with no one there. He said he and Rick shrugged it off, but it kept happening over the next few days. The guys in the shop began to say that they would see a shadow pass behind them while they worked and would turn and find no one around. There was also a picnic table out under a tree next to the employee parking lot where Ignacio used to take his smoke breaks. The guys swore you could see someone out there sometimes. I don't work there anymore, but while I did, I'd get the odd call from Joe now and again with some new tidbit about one of the guys having seen Ignacio around. I used to work graveyards at a youth detention center. Had this big black guy working with me and he was scared of the dark and so we would put him in the control room with all the camera screens. One night I'm reading a book and the blinds on the window next to me slowly start rolling down just real slow, like, deliberately slow. Anyway, this kind of freaked me out, but I'm a pretty logical guy so I brushed it off and tried to just focus on my book and when I'm about to do my next check. We have to do checks on the kids every 15 minutes to make sure that the kids haven't hung themselves or tried to break out or something along that line. About 5 minutes after the window blind incident, I'm about to get up and go do my check when my radio turns on and a woman yells jump. Which of course, made me jump. We didn't have a woman on duty and our radios are protected from strange radios nearby, or so they told me. Then I thought that maybe my big black coworker was trying to mess with me. When I confronted him about it, he told me that he didn't think those kinds of jokes were funny, because he's afraid of the dark, and he would never do that. The guy almost had tears in his eyes, he was more freaked out than I was. But I was still freaked out, so I spent the rest of the night in control room with my big black friend and would walk all the way to the other side of the facility to do my checks because I didn't want to be in that room alone again. My cat ducking meowing at something outside. Skunk scratching at window above my bed. I once came downstairs one morning to find the front door of my house slightly cracked. Thought it might have been my family, but my family isn't stupid to leave the front door unattended with cat roaming house. A recorder flute type thing playing on my street. I once saw a raccoon that could be mistaken for a medium-sized dog. Or a very large obese cat. I'm very ducking sensitive to strange shit. I have felt shit touch me while I'm completely awake. I sometimes seen shit out the corner of my eye for it to be gone soon. I've had bright lights appear before me just to disappear the next time I blinked. I don't remember if this was a dream or not, but one time when I was at my grandma's house in California, I looked at the door to the water heater and peered through a portal and a green goo splashed on me. I've become a night owl because I'm just so ducking paranoid at this point. I either don't have a dream, or I do have a dream. Worst dream I had was probably when my family and I moved into this new house. I had a dream of dark beings saying shit like you'll find the answers below. Now I hadn't been in the basement yet, so I'd if they were talking about that or something else. But the thing that woke me from that dream was the being took over my family's body. Started saying shit and put all their hands on me. I felt the ducking hands. You could put me on 10 different lie detectors at once and I still would say I felt those hands. I don't know what is going on at this point. Okay, so my family home is in the middle of nowhere. To go home from a train station, I have to walk for almost an hour through a field, right next to a tree line of a semi-large forest. Lots of wild animals making animal noises. I'm also a night owl and a professional procrastinator, so if I'm going home for a weekend, you bet I'm taking the latest night train and walking home in the middle of the night. I've heard it all. Deer, stags, foxes. I'm kinda afraid of hogs, but I'm yet to encounter one. Deer calls are kinda eerie. They sound vaguely like human scream. And if I hear one at a certain point of the walk, where I know the sound won't reach the human settling, I like to scream back, just for lulz. If there's a hunter waiting somewhere, he's gonna have the creepiest experience. A deer call and then all ya ag from the other side. That kind of thing. Middle of night, partner asleep, dog in the kitchen downstairs. Suddenly can hear microwave working. WTF? Go downstairs, it is on, out of reach of dog, only 2 people inside, so I turn it off. I reach second step back upstairs and can hear MW programming itself again, right in front of me, not a soul nearby downstairs but me and dog. I turn plug off the wall so it doesn't have any power to run. Left me shaken for few hours. Once, when I was younger, I slept in my basement for a couple of nights. On the first night, I woke up to the sounds of a hammer slamming into the closet and underneath the bed I was laying in. I screamed and the pounding stopped momentarily. Then, as soon as I was about to fall back asleep, the pounding started again but also picked up speed. Once again, as soon as I started crying the pounding stopped. The next night, I was a bit more reluctant but I decided to suck it up and sleep down there again. The same thing happened, but this time, however, when I started screaming for the pounding to stop it just increased until I couldn't hear myself crying and didn't stop until I ran upstairs. I slept on the kitchen floor that night. Was probably nothing but scared the living shit out of me nonetheless. Used to work in a group home for kids with autism/intellectual disability. It's on this old farm with buildings from the 1700s and many spooky tales about the lady who ran it 100 years ago. We worked 24-hour shifts, which means sleeping there at night. The girl I worked with lived on the upper floor of a cottage, so just me and her in that part of the building. She always slept through the night, but to be safe we had a motion detector just outside the door to the stairs. Sometimes it would go off in the middle of the night, with no reasonable explanation. We decided to exchange it for a new one and it didn't happen for a few months. Then one night it beeped so I went up to check. Her bedroom door was closed so it wasn't her. I opened the door out to the stairs and the light was on. It has a timer for about 5 minutes so someone must have turned it on recently. No one there, all doors locked. Went back into my bedroom and the chest with all the workers' stuff had the drawers dragged out. I set camp in the living room that night. I live in the woods. For context, my mother lives across the street, but besides that, no neighbors or people for miles. It's 13 miles out to the gas station and 26 to town. Woods. So one night I'm sitting on my couch, it's about 8 p.m. and my son had fallen asleep early in a giant pillow and blanket nest he made on the couch, so I decide to play a game, Skyrim if anyone cares. I'm enjoying my mommy alone time, getting into the game and just generally having a good time when I hear my pit bull, Aries, bark outside. Just one bark, it's a thing he does when Hess ready to come in, just one woof, hey mom you left me out here bark at the back door, but I'm mid-quest, it's not late, it's a beautiful evening out so I ignore him. I even said you're fine out loud and continued to play. He keeps doing it, just one bark, about every 15 to 20 minutes, and now I'm getting annoyed because every time he does it it rips me out of my concentration and ruins my immersion in the game that I rarely get to sit down and enjoy, so now, I'm purposefully ignoring him. I'm like if I wanted to let you in I would have already. Now it's almost 10 p.m, I'm getting fully annoyed because he keeps doing it, and besides startling the shit out of me when I'm concentrating I keep getting the guilty urge well if you'd let him in head stop and I'm having trouble concentrating because I'm just waiting on him to do it again. And he does, that one, loud, imperative bark hey, you forgot me mom. And I finally lose my temper, pause the game and toss my controller into the blanket pile that is my son's nest next to me, and it hits someone and I hear a doggy snore. I move the blankets and terraces, sound asleep. When I say fear like I've never felt washed over me I mean it. It was dark and ancient and I felt like a caveman huddled round a fire, small and vulnerable. A voice in my head that sounded like my grandmother but also me said if you open that door, you're dead. Don't take one step, ignore it and it will go away. So I picked up my controller and forced myself to keep going. The barks came 3 or 4 more times and every time I'd look at Aries and go nope, not moving. Around midnight the house felt normal again, like a weight had been lifted and I went to sleep, but that's the scariest thing I've experienced as both a night owl and living in the woods. Worked night shift putting up/moving displays and restocking in a big store. This often involved going outside to get extra shelving materials. Usually we would go out in pairs, shit's heavy, but sometimes we just didn't have enough people for that. Went out by myself one time to get some more beams. While looking for the correct size, I very clearly heard someone say this one is, whatever size I needed, I don't remember, off to my left. No one was there. No one else was even outside. It was freezing cold so the few night shift people were all sticking to the building as much as possible. Still, I took a look and, yep, there was the beam I needed. I said, thank you out loud and hightailed it back inside. I dunno if it was a ghost, the fae, some weirdo, my subconscious, whatever, but I wasn't gonna stick around to find out. Overall pretty weird, but the creepiest thing about that job was the horrific pay lamau. I was in the National Guard for about 2 years. I graduated BCT at 17 but was medically discharged this past year after a series of service-unrelated mental health incidents. I miss it so ducking much. A bit of backstory here. I went to basic at Fort Sill. Early on, a rumor started spreading around the battery that our little corner of Fort Sill was haunted. We had this one weird chick among us, we'll call her Susie, who was a professional bullshitter and claimed to have opened her third eye after being in a coma. She also claimed to be her 26-year-old boyfriend's dom. Said 26-year-old had supposedly been in love with her since she was 12 and he was 20, but that's a whole nother can of worms. She told us that there was a ghost in the bay named Brittany, a former trainee who had died of a heat stroke or something like that. Of course, we all figured she was full of it, until girls started reporting weird shit happening while they were on night watch. It was always the 3 to 4 a.m. shift. Someone would head into the latrine to tidy up and shit would start moving around by itself. At first we thought it was Susie ducking with us, but the latrine was always empty when these things happened, and trainees had to sign in and out at the night guard desk before going to the bathroom at night so we could have seen if she was in there or not. Plus, Susie was a lazy shit who could barely get up for her own guard duty, much less somehow sneak into the brightly lit latrine and hide there long enough without being caught by the other night guard. Finally, one fateful July night, it was my turn to work the 3 to 4 shift. Me and my bunkmate scooted up to sign in, then I went off to sweep and polish the potties. I was on high alert, being a superstitious southerner, but the latrine had to be cleaned by morning. So here I am, doing my thing, when I hear this crash come from the broom closet. I about shit myself, but chalked it up to me just setting something off balance when I had gone to get my cleaning supplies. Then I saw movement in the mirror. Nobody had entered the latrine, it was just me and my broom. I gave the place a once over just to double check. Maybe someone was still in here taking a shit from the last guard pair's shift. I even checked the showers. Nothing. I was about to go back to sweeping when I heard something else. I turn around, and all the ducking shower curtains are closing. I absolutely booked it out of there and cheerfully informed my buddy that it was her turn to clean. Duck Brittany. It's not what I heard, it's what I saw. When I was 19 I was driving home from my GFS house. She lived about an hour away. I lived in the middle of nowhere. Super small town with only one convenience store. It was 3 a.m. and I had to be up at 7 to go to work. Anyways, I usually kill my headlights about 3 blocks before I get home so that my family doesn't hear or see me pull in. As I was doing so, I was looking out my passenger window. I drove a Hyundai Elantra super quiet car. I lived right by an elementary school and it was a full moon, so you could still kinda see the silhouettes of the school playground. They have this soccer field right next to our house, and as I was looking I saw something hunched over about as tall as the soccer post. I think they are like 8-9 feet. In disbelief I went inside, and to my surprise my brothers were gaming out on Halo. They saw my face and immediately said, "What's up man, why do you look freaked out?" I told them what I saw and they thought I was full of shit. So to try to prove it to them they went outside to check it out with me. My brother grabbed a BB gun to just shoot in the general direction to scare whatever off if there was something. We stood outside for like 10 minutes and we saw nothing. My brother chambered the last BB into the gun and shot it towards the school roof. It hit the roof that was made of aluminum, so you could hear the BB slowly traveling down from the spot it hit. My brother pretty much said that was the last one, you must have been seeing shit. Right when he said that we heard the sound of heavy weight hitting the floor. We could feel the floor vibrate. I can't even explain how heavy it sounded. Like someone deadlifting thousands of pounds and just letting the weight drop. That noise was followed by the sound of wind breaking and heavy breathing. We all just kind of followed our instincts and booked it inside. I turned around right before losing my sight of line and all I saw was a silhouette of a leg turning a corner by the school. We were all riled up after that my parents woke up wondering WTF was going on. We explained it to them and they reported it in. That's as far as it got. Nothing was discovered or reported since that day. Shit has me looking out of my windows all the time, even now that I'm 30. My baby cousin's witches. When I was 12 we lived with my auntie, uncle and younger cousins who were 7, 5 and 3. I had to share a bed with the 3-year-old. She was a really smart little kid, a big vocabulary for her age and an imagination to match. One night we were laying in bed and suddenly she started crying and pointing at the corner of the room, furthest from us. The only light was the street lights outside. I said, "What's wrong, Jay? What's there?" I wasn't able to see anything, not even a spider, which I thought it was. My baby cousin said through tears, "The witches are looking at us, they are mean." I was freaking out inside by this time as I still couldn't see anything, so I asked her, "How many witches can you see, Jay?" She answered, still crying in my arms, "There are 3, and they are coming." I started to feel slightly unnerved by this, as obviously my baby cousins weren't allowed to watch scary films programs, or listen to scary stories, especially at 3, so this came out of the blue. All I could do by this time was to distract my baby cousin by telling her I wouldn't let the mean witches get her, and singing her nursery rhymes until she fell asleep in my arms. I didn't sleep at all that night. Lol. My cousin is now a beautiful, successful student teacher, and like a lot of people we talk about our childhood. She remembers a lot of the things we did together, but she never remembers that night. Back when I was 9, I got horrible sleep. I'd sleep for 2 hours and be up the rest of the night. My grandpa was the same. Sometimes he'd be up at 4 a.m. watching TV in the living room because he couldn't sleep. If I was awake, I would join him. He'd keep the TV quiet as to not wake anyone. It's an old house with 0 doors, so sound travels far. However, I'd always know when he was up because I could hear his footsteps. He wears slippers with no backs, kind of like Squidward's, so while walking he slides his feet. Sliding feet against carpet is how I'd know he was up. My room is close to the living room, while my grandpa's room is quite literally right next to the living room. So it's easy for me to hear his footsteps. To the story, it's about 3:30 a.m. and I hear my grandpa's footsteps. I rushed out of bed down the 3-step staircase and into the living room. I stopped confused. I can see into his bedroom from the living room and he is sleeping. His bedroom light isn't on, the TV isn't on, and he is clearly sleeping. While standing there, the hair all over my body shot straight up. I felt a shiver down my spine along with a feeling of dread and impending doom. I ran back to my room, hopped in my bed, and put my blanket over my head. Suddenly, heavy footsteps coming from the edge of the living room began thumping its way towards me. Through the living room. Thump thump thump, up the 3 steps. Thump thump thump. Then stepping right at the side of my bed. A creepy, exasperated, heavy breathing followed suit. The breathing was right next to my ear. This continued for what seemed like forever, but eventually it stopped when I heard my grandpa's footsteps. By then it was 5:30 a.m. I worked at a store in downtown Vancouver. There was 2 of us employees to do the closing. It was about 9 p.m. and by this time, we have cleared all the aisles of customers. When we were finished counting the cash, we saw an old lady walking at the very back of the aisles. So I told my coworker to check it out while I go and put the money in the safe. She came back a few minutes later pale as duck and told me she checked everywhere and there wasn't an old lady at all. The front entrance and exits were locked by a code since we had to get the money out, so an alarm will sound if you open it. Even from the inside we had to check the back where only employees are allowed. You had to punch in your code before going in or else a loud alarm will go off the moment you push the door open. No one there either. Needless to say, we grabbed our shit and got out of there real fast. I usually do the closing shifts because I like working when it's not busy, and sometimes when I close the lights, I see shadow figures kinda peeking. My coworkers also saw these and feel like they're being watched as soon as the lights are off. It's an old building but our store was built just the previous year. There was also one time when I heard someone whisper my name in my ear. I yelled "What the duck" so loud, I didn't even care what the customers would think. No one was beside me at all, that aisle was empty. It was crazy. Glad I dipped out of there. I fell asleep with my dog outside the cabin my family was staying at. Kids were partying, normal nighttime outdoor noises in the woods. I woke up when everything went silent. Creepy silent, no crickets or anything. Then this sound happened. It sounded like a person mimicking a bird. Almost like the sound they make in Night at the Roxbury when they tell the ambulance joke. My dog was super interested in it. She moved toward it, which is odd. She's very clingy. I threw a rock, the noise stopped and the woods noises came alive immediately. I noped the hell back inside with my dog. I had no idea what it was. After some extensive research I found a video of cougar noises. They have an incredible vocal range and can mimic a lot of other creatures. The sound was on the track. My other dog, a husky, listened to the whole video with no interest. As soon as that sound I heard in the woods came in, he jumped up and ran to my phone and started pawing at it. That damned cat was making a noise to specifically lure my dog away from me. Context: it's Halloween in 2020, I have my PS4 downstairs near my glass back door. The time was around 3:30 a.m., and I was around 12 to 13 years old and hated Halloween as it scared me. And some buddies were playing some games and having good laughs. When my friend wanted to try the Halloween event I said alright as I didn't want to be the one to ruin the night, so I played. After 2 to 3 matches we learned it had ambient noises, i.e. clapping, laughing, humming, and even piano noises. This made me feel a little uneasy about the situation as I hate scary things Earl. So, once the 3rd match started I heard a knock to my left, towards my back door. It scared me and I laughed it off while asking if anyone else heard the knock. Everyone in the voice call said no. So, I thought it was a little weird and kept playing. Later, as I was getting up to use the restroom, I heard breathing and a heavy knock on the door. I jump and run upstairs to my parents' room, grabbing my Red Ryder BB gun, the same design from A Christmas Story, and wake up my parents. I am explaining as fast as possible. We looked out the upstairs window while calling the police, and we see a man in all black standing behind the wall of our house, and he gets in a black sedan and drives off into the night. The police never decided to show up and rather let us defend ourselves. So at the end of the night I left my PS4 on, texted my friends and went to bed with a through search of my room and a locked window and door. Was watching it in my bed during my time off school from COVID. It was ABT 2 a.m. and I started hearing very faint humming that sounded like it was down the street. I passed it off as maybe someone doing something in their back garden and it's making the noise. Within 5 minutes the humming had crept closer and closer to my house until I could hear it perfectly outside. Me being me, I decided to look out my window and I watched the black cat walk from the front of my house and then disappear into some bushes. The humming had stopped and then started again ABT 10 minutes later, and it was incredibly hard to figure out where it was coming from. Maybe 2 to 3 minutes later I figured out it was from downstairs, so I sat in complete silence and listened. It started to slowly move around and then it sounded as if it was going up my stairs. I started getting cold sweats and a chill down my spine, and then it stopped. I went to sleep and had a nightmare about something coming into my home, and the only noise in that nightmare was the humming. ABT a year later now, and I haven't heard it since, but every time I think of it I get goosebumps. I worked at a mental hospital that had previously been a tuberculosis sanatorium at the beginning of the 20th century. I know, that is the most cliché shit ever, but the stereotype came from somewhere. If you look at mental hospitals in Colorado you can find it, but I'd prefer not to triangulate myself. Weird stuff happened pretty frequently at the hospital. To some extent, that's to be expected when you have patients suffering from psychosis and such, but some stories couldn't be adequately explained by that. For example, I worked with teenagers and my sister Wing worked with children. Several of my co-workers had kids come out of a specific room in the middle of the night asking staff what they wanted. Every time, the child told them they'd been woken up by someone calling their name. It was always the same room, and happened repeatedly with totally different patient cohorts. One child couldn't have simply told other kids they had had an experience in that room. The main/admin building also had weird reports. Back in the day the basement had been the morgue, and there were claims that there was an incinerator down there for bodies. A couple times police/fire had shown up saying they received a call from the building in the middle of the night. None of the staff had any idea what they were talking about. I was told it had been traced to the basement, which should have been impossible since there were no longer any working phones coming from there. Whether that part is true, I don't know. What I do know is it seemed more believable after my experience. Normally I work during the day, but one time I worked a double, so my shift ended at 1130 at night. There was a TV/DVD player AV cart thing that we occasionally borrowed from the admin building so we could show movies to the patients, but it had to be taken back when we were done for safety reasons. So at about 10 that night I started wheeling it back. Once I got to the admin building, I had to take an elevator to the upper floors to put the cart back where it belonged. It was already creepy. Most of the lights in the building were off/turned low. There were some people working since we took admits overnight, but it was still a lot more quiet than normal. The elevator itself is one of the really old-fashioned ones with a cage and everything. It's partially modernized, but a lot of it was from the original building. I got into the elevator with my cart, hit the button for the 3rd floor, and waited. However, instead of going up, the elevator went down. It stopped at the basement and let out a ding, but the doors never opened. It just sat there, with me in the cage and the doors outside closed, in the basement, in a mostly abandoned building that was reputed to be haunted. Then it just took me back up to the 3rd floor and everything was normal. I know it doesn't sound that scary, but honestly that 15 seconds or whatever while I was hitting the button to go back up seemed like they took for ducking ever. I was sure the doors were going to spring open any second and show me a corpse or something. After I got back to my building I told my coworkers about it, and apparently I wasn't the only one who had the elevator take them on an unexpected field trip. I never worked there at night again, lol. Oh, I got a good one. I'm a crew chief, fancy way of saying mechanic, in the USAF. I work on KC-135s, which were built between 1957-64. So they are all pretty old. One jet in particular had some scary stories about. It's called Spook 50, and rumor is that a boom operator was killed in flight by a mishap. Well, me and a fellow maintainer were working night shift, and were waiting for the fuel truck to show up so we could refuel the jet. It was about 3 a.m. With nothing to do but wait, we sat in the pilot's seats of Spook 50. Now normally, if it's a windy night, The winds can move some of the control surfaces, causing the yokes and the flight deck to move back and forth. Well, we are sitting there, in relative darkness, and all of a sudden the yokes move violently towards us. Got a little spooked, see what I did there, but figured it was the wind. About 5 minutes go by and it does it again. This time even more violent. At this point we both looked at each other, and heard a voice coming from the back cargo area, which was literally pitch black. I swear I heard a mumbled voice saying something. We both reacted at the same time, so he heard it too. We noped the duck off the jet and decided to wait for the fuel truck outside. That's when we realized it was the calmest night. Not a breeze, gust, or any sort of wind. As dead as it could be. I still get chills thinking about it. When the fuel truck finally showed up, we had to rock paper scissors for who would have to go up in the flight deck to monitor the fuel tanks while we refueled. I lost. The refuel went fine, but I was sweating the whole time. I was a preteen at the time. It was a Saturday night around 3:30 a.m. in the morning. I was sitting in my room watching YouTube and whatnot because I suffer from insomnia and I don't sleep very well. Everyone was asleep except my mom, watching TV quietly, not loud enough to hear. In her room, I suddenly heard noises coming from the corners of my room, and in my closet, and downstairs. All bedrooms in my house are upstairs, so nobody would have been downstairs at the time because it was late. I shot up out of my sheets and got scared. I sorta glanced around my room, with the dim lighting I had from the fairy lights hanging from my bed. I suddenly had gotten chills, thinking, was it a person? Or am I hearing things? My house is relatively new, built 2019, so there aren't any haunted spirits that I know of in the house. The noises from downstairs were loud enough that I could hear them from upstairs, being the room farthest from the stairs. I just brushed it off and decided I would tell my mom about it in the morning. I woke up and I walked over to my mom's room and asked, did you hear anything downstairs around 3:30 last night? Because I know you were awake at the time, and my mom replied to my surprise that she didn't hear anything. Her room is closest to the staircase downstairs. I've been having problems with this to this day. I'm the only child who has experienced sleep paralysis, hallucinating, etc. ever since we moved here. But oh well, opinions? I currently work overnights as a nursing assistant in an adult family home. It's small, so I work by myself. All residents have moderate to severe dementia, and it's pretty common for them to see things that aren't really there or to be unable to communicate what they are actually seeing, so I usually just play along in their reality but don't really pay attention to it. Except there was this one week where everyone on one side of the house just wouldn't sleep. They were all waking up every hour or so. Only one of the 3 residents was able to communicate verbally, the other 2 had severe enough dementia that they no longer were able to speak, and all she would say is that there was a man in the corner. Well, initially I didn't think anything of it, because this particular resident is also particularly susceptible to visual hallucinations, and I just sort of figured her wandering was waking up the other 2. But sometimes the other 2 would wake up first, and they seemed very agitated, so after about 4 nights I started wondering. I sat in the hallway on their side of the house instead of in the caregiver office all night, and didn't see anything. But they were getting agitated again. So I went outside, thinking maybe someone was out on the sidewalk. It's a locked and gated facility, so someone would have to climb the fence to get into the yard. Not impossible, but unlikely. Nope. Nothing there. But I shit you not, I swear when I looked inside I saw a man in the corner of one of the residents' rooms. It was only for a second. That resident went downhill super fast and ended up passing away about a month later. Still work here. I worked as a service writer / night shift shop foreman in a big rig and RV shop for a while. We only had 2 shifts and our shift was 1500 midnight. It was me, 3 to 4 techs and the parts guy in this huge place. Place was big on selling and servicing RVs. Anyway, it never got too creepy very often, but the one night that still raises the hairs on my neck just thinking about it goes like this. It was the late part of February and the snow had started falling good just after 1800. The cleaning crew bounced early due to the snow, but the guys wanted to keep working, so we did. Finally come 22:30 to 2300 the guys start winding down and leave about 2315. The parts guy offered to help me lock up as some of the exterior doors and fences were hard to close in the snow. I brush him off and tell him it's fine. I stay right up to midnight and close as per usual. On my walk out to my truck I realize I left my phone charger under my workstation. Now, it had already accumulated about 5 or so inches of snow at this point, and only tracks in the snow are mine and the faint outlines from where the others had left. So I spin back around toward the building and take about 3 steps when I begin to feel uneasy. The snow is falling pretty good, so there isn't any sound traveling from the interstate. Muffled silence. Another 2 steps and I'm feeling such fear and dread the likes I've never experienced before. I stop and look all around. Our parking lot is very well lit and the entire place is fenced off, but I don't see anything out of the ordinary. Facing the building and preparing to shove all that fear down, I finally see what's bothering me. Fresh tracks in the snow that do not belong to me or anything human.